I'm here today after a lovely vacation. And I have to tell you, if you haven't taken some time to decompress from work and all the other stuff that's going on right now, I highly recommend doing that. And I highly recommend not doing any work while you're on vacation. Now, I did do some work, but I wasn't actually working. Okay, I see some people have joined us. Great. Hey, Jesse. Hey, Payush. Hi, Oladapo. Hey, Lynn. So, today I want to talk to you about the things that I thought about while I was on vacation and how I didn't completely fail as a project manager, but in some ways I failed as a project manager because I didn't follow the core principles of productivity and project management that I talked to you guys about ad nauseum. So I made some slides because, I always make slides. We're going to talk about how the 6 productivity principles for WordPress project success actually apply to any kind of project. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, great. Now, before we start, let's define what a project actually is. Virtually everything's a project. Anything you do is a project, and you'll get some things wrong and some things right. But if you apply these 6 core principles to all projects, then over time, you're going to get more things right than you get wrong. So everything's a project. When you go grocery shopping, even cleaning your house, yard work, buying a house, renting an apartment, going out with friends, vacation. All of these things require some form of planning, and these principles can really be applied to all of these. So let's review for a moment our 6 core principles. These are the 6 productivity principles for WordPress project success. Now you'll notice that some things are struck out, and that's because those apply specifically to WordPress. So the first one, and they're not really in any particular order, this is just the way they're numbered, but when you perform them could be different for different projects. So define the job in detail. And for WordPress, with a content first approach. But since we're just talking about my vacation and my whitewater rafting trip, we'll leave that out. So define the job in detail, get the right resources involved, break the job down, estimate the time and cost. Usually on something like a whitewater trip, you only have to do that once, but during a project, you need to estimate the time and cost often. And then establish a change procedure and agree on acceptance criteria. So if I had to pick the one principle that is probably the umbrella principle, is define the job in detail, because if you think about it, all those other principles feed into defining the job in detail. So let's review what I did as a project manager while I was on vacation. So principle 1, define the job in detail. So the very first step of defining the job in detail is to define the requirements. So our requirements, let me just back up. Okay, I went on vacation with 3 of my girlfriends. So there were 4 of us. We went to the North Carolina mountains, and we decided we wanted to do some adventure things. We went ziplining, which, by the way, was fabulous. And we also went whitewater rafting. And our requirements for the whitewater rafting trip were that it was easy whitewater, because one of our girls doesn't swim and was very terrified. Well, she didn't go ziplining either. She ended up not going on the whitewater trip because she's got some personal issues and couldn't come with us. She came a couple of days later. So we did this on one of the days when she wasn't there, because that way she didn't feel left out. But still, we're in our 60s and our 70s. So we didn't want to do anything that was too challenging. We're not all in the greatest of shape. Some of us are, not me. And so we wanted to do easy whitewater. Needed to be affordable. We're all on a budget, right? It needed to be close by our location. We didn't want to have to drive hours and hours from where we were staying. And we needed alternatives for those not wanting to participate. So I had planned that, but then it wasn't necessary because the girl that really didn't want to participate in these adventure activities came a few days later. So those are our requirements. Now, as I said earlier, you'll do some things right and you'll do some things wrong. So the first thing that I did was break the job down, and I did that right. I did most of these things right. We got an agreement on the trip details amongst us. We booked the trip with the outfitter, and we signed waivers. You always have to sign a liability waiver when you do whitewater rafting. So we broke the job down. I did that pretty well. Then the next one was estimate the time and cost. I did some things right. I did some things wrong. Okay, so it was $30 a person if we went without a guide, and $70 a person if we had a guide. Since we're on a budget, and I had done this river before many times, and it's one of the least taxing, or it has the lowest amount of whitewater. Whitewater is classified how big the rapid is by numbers. 1 is the easiest, 5 is the hardest. So this river had all 1s and 2s, and the very last rapid, the one that you've probably seen the picture of, was a class 3, and they call them by class 1, class 2, class 3. So I felt like, we could save some money and just do $30 a person, rent the raft, and do it ourselves. I also had to estimate the drive time from where we were staying to the place and back. How much time was it going to take us on the river? They said it would be 2 to 3 hours. It took us a lot longer than that because we sucked at it. And I estimated our experience with whitewater. Both of the ladies that went with me had done it before, so not too worried about that. Here's what I did not estimate: the upper body strength of 60 and 70-year-olds. It didn't require as much body strength for me, upper body strength for me, because I was in the back of the boat serving as the rudder, so I could lean back and I wasn't having to paddle this way. But I assumed, see, I made some assumptions I shouldn't have made. I assumed that because they had done it before, that they knew how to paddle. There's a certain way you have to paddle in a raft, and a certain way you have to paddle in whitewater, and there are different strokes. And I just assumed, since they said they'd done it before, that they knew all that. And I also assumed that we would complete it in the estimated time of 2 to 3 hours, which did not happen. So here are my lessons learned from that. Don't take someone's word for their experience. If you've got a team member and they tell you these are their skills, and or maybe you're taking on a new team member or a contractor, don't take their word for their experience. Ask a lot more questions. Make sure that they have the skill set that you really need them to have before you begin. And then always plan for overruns. In our case, the fact that it took longer was not that big of a deal, because originally I had planned that we would go whitewater rafting in the morning and tubing in the afternoon, because riding a tube down a river is not very strenuous. And I thought, well, we can do both in one day. They're close by each other. We won't have to drive as far, blah, blah, blah. Really glad we didn't do that, because it took us a long time to get down that river, and we were exhausted when it was over. The next principle: establish a change procedure. So I did consider some of these things. These are the things I did right. What if the outfitter is closed due to COVID? Well, I checked on that ahead of time. What if it rains? Well, we decided we get our money back if it rains, so we would just go shopping or somewhere indoors. And what if someone changes their mind at the last minute? They look at the river and go, wait, I decided I don't want to do that. So I did consider all of those things. And we decided that if everybody decided they didn't want to go, we wouldn't go. If 1 or 2 decided they didn't want to go, maybe the rest of us would still go. So we had a contingency plan. But then what I didn't do right, I didn't consider, what if the orientation doesn't include paddling instructions? Because I had done this river, the last time I did it was maybe 20 years ago. And I guess that's right, maybe 25. Anyway, I remembered that in the orientation, they included how to paddle a rubber raft. And so when we got to orientation and we went, they told us all about what to do when you fall out, how to put your feet in front of you when you go down the river, never let go of your paddle, all of those, but they didn't really teach us any paddling skills. And if you go with a guide, that's not such a big deal, because they'll teach you and they shout out the strokes before we start and all of that. I didn't consider that my participants are not as experienced as they told me they were. And that because I was in the back and two other ladies were in the front of the raft, that one side might be stronger than the other. The first thing that I did invoke some change, however, because when we got in the raft and we started paddling, first of all, somebody in another boat said, "You do a lot better if y'all paddle together." So our people were paddling at different times, and that didn't work. But one thing I did, because one of our people was left-handed, and when they got in the boat, they actually got in the boat where their stronger arm would be at the top. No, at the bottom. Like you put your hand on the top of the paddle, and then you put your other hand down lower to the blade. And so I noticed right away that neither one of them were paddling with their stronger arm. One was left-handed, one was right-handed. So I made them switch sides, which they complained about until we got down to the river and they saw that they really needed that strength to do it the other way. So those were the things I didn't consider when establishing change. What would we do? But I kind of mediated in the process. Okay, so what is the lessons learned from that? Just ask more questions of all the participants, the client, the team members, the third-party resources. Just ask more questions. And then also research what the alternatives are. If X happens, then what can happen in replace of that? Like me switching my people from one side of the boat to the other. And then agree on acceptance criteria. This one was easy. We only had one criteria. And that criteria was that nobody fell out. That's not really a picture of us. That's just another whitewater rafting picture. But that was our acceptance criteria. We would consider this a success if nobody swims. So that actually did turn out to be true. So getting the right resources involved is the other part of defining the job in detail. And I did some things wrong and I did some things right. So the first thing I did was I got a good outfitter, the Nantahala Outdoor Center. This was on the Nantahala River in western North Carolina in the U.S. And I'd been with this outfitter on this river as well as many other rivers. They have an outpost on just about every whitewater river there is. So that was known to me, so I did that right. My friends both are athletic. Even though they're in their 60s and their 70s, they're pretty athletic. They're not the kind that just want to do their nails and fix their hair. And everyone said they were experienced. So in that case, I did get the right resources involved. What I should have done was considered that things may have changed with the outfitter since the last time I went on this trip, which was the little intro video was different than I was expecting. Or maybe that was on a different river. It's been so long, I don't remember where that video was. I just assumed that it was on the Nantahala. I should have made sure that that orientation included paddling instructions. And when it didn't, I should have pulled my girls aside and said, okay, before we get on the water, here's what you need to know. And I should have taught them the strokes. So there's forward paddle, and then there's back paddle, but there's also draw, which is where you dig in the water to one side or the other and draw it towards the boat. And I didn't explain any of that. So I should have done that. And once again, I should have asked more questions. Defining the job in detail requires asking as many questions as you need to ask to get all the information that you need. So these are my lessons learned from getting the right resources involved. Research, research, research. I could have called the outfitter and asked them, you know, was this appropriate for our age? Was this appropriate for our skill level? I should have maybe asked them, you know, what does the orientation include? I just made some assumptions. And then you also want to verify your known resources every time. Just because a third-party resource or a tool that you're using, but you haven't used it in a while, don't make the assumption that it works exactly the same way. So verify your known resources every single time. So let's go back to define the job in detail and kind of get the big picture of what happened on this trip. So what I did wrong in defining the job in detail was I made assumptions without verifying them. I didn't consider time overruns. I relied on my 30-year-old memory. Okay, I guess it was 30 years. I figured it up later. I didn't remediate when the video before the trip didn't include instructions on how to paddle. The other thing is, one of our ladies, I could not get her to stop doing this, where you reach forward like you might see in a canoe. And I kept telling her to keep it down on her hip and just dig it in the water and use her hip as leverage. And I should have taught her that before we got on the water. It was too late to teach her that once I got on the water. So I didn't remediate when there wasn't the same instruction that I thought they were going to get from the outfitter. I didn't ask enough questions of the participants. And I didn't even consider using a subject matter expert or a guide on this trip. And I guess my pride got a little in the way. And that's another thing. Don't let your pride get in the way if you need a third party subject matter expert to help with something you've never done before. Now, although I had done this before, one might consider, I guess the last time I actually rafted a river, this river was 30 years ago, but other rivers probably 20 years ago. So hindsight, it would have been a lot more fun for everyone if we had paid the $70 per person and actually gotten a guide. Not that we needed it in terms of this is so scary and we got to have some expert to do it, but I screamed at these people, my friends, the entire trip. All I did was bark out orders and kind of get irritated when they didn't do what I asked them to do. And when we got to the very, very end, my last question was, are we still friends? And thankfully, they are good friends and were willing to continue to be my friend for the rest of our vacation and hopefully forever. But I wish I had actually stopped and said, you know what, y'all, maybe we should switch this to a guided trip and pay the $70. And then I would have had a better time because I wouldn't have felt so responsible. And we would have all been team members as opposed to me being the one barking out the orders from the back of the boat. So my overall lessons learned, and there's a picture of us on that very last rapid. So the overall lessons learned that I learned from this was you need to define the roles clearly. I should have spelled out to them what their role was in the boat and what their responsibilities were, and that I was going to be the lead and that they needed to do exactly what I said when I said it. But it all turned out just fine. You need to verify your team member experience and skills. And if they don't have the skills that you thought they had, make sure you remediate that before you get going on the river. That doesn't stop. It just, you can pull over to the side, but even that's not as easy as it looks. So you need to remediate if your team members don't have the proper skills. You need to verify your known resources, that they match the history that you have with that resource or your memory. You need to plan for overruns. Now, of course, our objective is always not to have cost overruns or time overruns, but you need to plan for what happens if you do. And thankfully, we had already decided that it was too much to try to do two things in one day. The trip was supposed to take 2 to 3 hours. It took us about 4. And then by the time we got out, turned in our raft, turned in our equipment, and sat down for a few minutes, it was probably more like 4.5. So yeah, it was tough. And you also want to always consider using additional subject matter experts, outsourcing, when it's something that you are not confident in that you know how to do, or you just need extra help, whether that's a VA or outsourcing to somebody like GoWP for your maintenance, anything like that. You need to consider that for every project. Even in the top of your head, you're thinking, I don't need any help. Go ahead and look at each piece of it and then consider if you do need help. Okay. Hey, Vito. Thanks for joining. Okay. And then project success. Even though I got a lot of things wrong, I got some things right. And since our single criteria for project success was that nobody fell out and nobody did, then that to me was project success. And we ended up with happy friends that still liked me after I'd been yelling at them for close to 4 hours. This was actually taken, this picture was taken mid-trip when we stopped to take a break. They had some little restaurants right on the side of the road and little cabins and stuff. So we pulled over and took a rest. And so that's where, we're not near as tired here as we were after that last photo. So we did end up with project success. And the takeaways from all of this is that you can apply these 6 principles to every single project in your life. Now, granted, a change procedure to go shopping, maybe you don't need a change procedure to go shopping, but you do need to define the job in detail, right? You're going to make a shopping list. You're going to get the right resources involved. Maybe you have one store that you shop at for regular stuff and another store you shop at for organic stuff. So these things really do apply to every single project. And the main thing to remember is that failure always results in lessons learned and best practices. Overall, the project wasn't a failure, but I feel I could have done a better job had I researched the outfitter a little more, researched my team members a little more, and considered getting some help and establishing those roles early up front of who was going to do what and what your responsibility was. All of that would have been good. Now, if you want to learn more about applying these principles to your WordPress projects, then I want to invite you to join the WP Project Managers Academy and join the premium membership. Now, most of you, if you've followed me for a while, you've been in my group a while, you know that joining the WP Project Managers Academy is free, and that gives you automatic access to WordPress Project Management 101, the roadmap for that. And that is more of the DIY version of this whole process and how to apply these principles in every segment of your project management methodology. The complete project management roadmap for WordPress is more comprehensive and gives you tons more done for you templates and samples and things you can take and use right away. But the thing to remember about this program, it is the only program of its kind that teaches you how to consistently get your projects completed on time, within budget, with features that meet the client's business requirements without sacrificing your own profit. Now, there are other courses out there who teach project management, but what they're really teaching is business management. And it comes down to a lot more than that. This is focused completely on project management. Now, here's some details about the program. The complete project management roadmap for WordPress allows you to target your training based on your current problems. We have one section of these mini roadmaps that is specifically for the project management lifecycle: proposal, deep dive, development and testing, and all of that. Then we've got another section that are focused on problems, and these are common problems that most people have, and we solve them for you. Getting content from the client, content collection, scope creep, client acquisition. Now, I am not an expert on client acquisition, but I know the people who are, and I've included them. They've included lessons in this program for you. Managing clients, agency productivity, and there's even more. And now that it's finished, it's also going to include ongoing curated content from my subject matter experts. Remember how I said get help from those people who know more than you do? And that I have actually taken that into account in this course. But the good news is you can cancel anytime. So let's say you join for a month and it's just not what you thought, or you don't have time, you can cancel anytime. But if you wait and then decide to do it, it's going to cost more. And like I said, pretty much everything you would need in the way of templates for things like proposals and your change procedure and your acceptance criteria and all of that is in the program. And the new thing that's coming is that there will be certifications. There will be the opportunity to get certified through the Project Management 101 roadmap, and then there will be opportunities to get certified in the premium membership. There'll be a different certification for that. I don't have all the details of that ironed out, but you'll be hearing a lot more about that in the group. Now, I really need to be focusing on getting people exposed to this program because I want to help folks with the things they're struggling with, which is almost always content collection, scope creep, and client management. And then all those other things like validation and testing and productivity kind of are rolled into those things as well. So I really want to help people. And so I'm going to be spending a lot more time focusing on that program. So there's going to be some changes coming to our Facebook group. Okay. So I hope you got something out of that, how you can take those 6 principles and apply them to any project. And I hope that while we were going over that, you kind of extrapolated what I was talking about into maybe your current projects or the projects you're working on, or maybe a home improvement project, because they all use those core 6 principles. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for joining and checking this out. And if you're watching the replay, if you would just type replay in the chat so I'll know who showed up later, that would be really helpful. Thanks so much for joining me today, guys. And until next time, stay productive, stay strong, and remember, never stop learning. Bye, guys.